Okay, let's face it, democracy, well, it's struggling. I mean, everywhere, right?
Seems like it.
Polarization, governments, well, they just can't seem to get anything done. And people just feel like they're not being heard, you know?
It's interesting though. All this is happening at the same time. We have these like incredible advancements in technology,
Yeah, like AI.
especially AI. Like, what if, and I know this sounds crazy, but what if AI could actually help us govern ourselves better?
Okay, so that is exactly what we are diving into today.
Oh, cool.
We've got this, it's fascinating, really. Whole bunch of stuff on this concept called superintelligent democracy.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's by this AI expert, Elias Kalors.
Yeah, from what I've read, he thinks this super intelligent democracy thing, it's like the best solution to all the problems that, democracy is facing these days. He's suggesting we use AI to like improve the whole way we govern ourselves.
Yeah.
Make it, more inclusive, more efficient, like actually listen
Mm-hmm.
to what people want, their values.
Right. I mean, he's not talking about like small changes here.
No, no, no.
This is like a total, complete overhaul of, how we decide on things.
Yeah,
Everything.
absolutely.
Climate change.
Yeah.
Education. Everything, right?
I mean, he's talking about using AI to solve all the problems, the big ones, the ones that, regular democracy has been trying to figure out forever.
Like for decades.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where do we even start?
Right.
The stuff we've got, it mentions all these things like moral graphs, blockchain, and of course, AI.
Right. Well, all those pieces, they kind of fit together, in Cooler's system.
Okay.
The moral graphs, they're like visual representations of how our values, like as a society, connect to our actions, and that guides the AI, like how it makes decisions.
Yeah.
And the blockchain, well, that makes sure everything's transparent and secure.
Okay, so this whole moral graph thing, I mean, it's the core of this super intelligent democracy. So break it down for me. How does it work?
Okay, imagine like this big database, right?
Okay.
Everyone can see it. And it maps out all our values, our shared values as a society. Like, let's say we all agree that sustainability is important, or fairness, or accessible healthcare.
Uh-huh.
Those values, they get put into this moral graph. So instead of politicians arguing about what the people want, you just look at the moral graph. It's like concrete data. It shows you what people actually care about.
So it's like a way to take like these abstract ideas like values and turn them into actions.
Exactly. And the thing is, these moral graphs, they're not set in stone.
Oh.
They're open source. Anyone can look at them, check them out, even suggest changes. So it's all transparent, No one can like manipulate it or hide anything.
That makes sense. But I mean, how do I, as like a regular person, get my values into this system? Is it like voting? But like more often.
It's kind of like that, but Coulors, he suggests this system where citizens, they can give their input all the time, not just during elections. So you could actually weigh in on decisions as they come up, not just every few years.
Right.
It's supposed to make the whole system more dynamic, responsive, like the government actually reacts to what people want.
It sounds pretty cool in theory, but how do you make sure everyone can participate? Like, not everyone has the latest tech.
Well, that's what Coulors emphasizes.
Yeah.
You got to have multiple ways to participate, like mobile apps, yeah, but also like low-tech options, make sure everyone can be included. That's like the whole point of this super intelligent democracy, right?
It is. Okay, so this is the big question, right? How does AI actually use these moral graphs to make decisions? I mean, it's kind of easy to imagine like a scary sci-fi movie where the AI takes
Yeah,
over.
oh, totally.
And that's not exactly, reassuring.
Yeah, you're right. And Coulors, he knows that's a concern. He's all about ethical AI development. He talks about things like adversarial testing. So they use AI to check the system itself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, for biases, vulnerabilities, make sure it's fair. So you reduce the risk of things going wrong.
So we're not just letting the AI do whatever it wants.
No, no, no.
We're making sure it aligns with our values and that its decisions actually benefit, everyone.
Exactly. It's more like the AI, it's like a super efficient advisor. Like it processes tons of data, figures out what might happen, and then presents it all clearly to humans, the people who actually make the decisions. Coulors, he sees it as like a collaboration. AI helps us, it doesn't replace us.
Okay, so it sounds like Kalors has thought about the risks and how to make this accessible to everyone.
He has, definitely.
But, and this is a big but, he doesn't just stop at the theory, right?
No.
He actually has like a plan to put this into action.
He does.
Starting with like pilot programs.
Yeah, pilot program.
Yeah.
In Germany.
Yeah. German municipalities.
Wow.
then like the whole country, then the EU.
And eventually he wants everyone to use it. It's all open source, so anyone can adapt it, implement it. He thinks this could be like the new standard,
Right.
for how we govern ourselves.
It's ambitious.
Yeah.
Really ambitious.
Right.
But let's get practical for a second. What would this actually mean for, like, regular people?
Yeah, good point.
Politicians, businesses, like, what would it look like?
Yeah, so Coulors, he actually lays out specific benefits for each group. Like, for citizens, you'd have more of a say in, things that matter to you. You'd see real results like on climate change or education, and the influence of like money and lobbying. That would go way down.
Okay, those are some pretty good arguments.
Yeah.
But what about the politicians themselves? I mean, would they even be willing to, like, give up some of their power?
That's the thing. It would definitely shift the balance of power. But Coulors, he thinks politicians would benefit too.
Right.
They'd have a better understanding of what their constituents want.
No.
Less pressure from, special interest groups. And they could focus on, like, actually governing ethically, actually representing the people's will.
So less campaigning, less fundraising, more, actual governing, which is, kind of their job, right?
Exactly. And for businesses, they'd be operating in, like, a more stable environment. The policies would be predictable and aligned with, what society wants.
Totally.
That would help them plan for the long term, less uncertainty.
So it sounds like this super intelligent democracy thing could, like, affect the whole economy, not just, like, the government itself.
I think so.
Right.
A whole system.
So we've talked about the theory, the good stuff, the plan for putting it into action. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think we need to talk about, the potential problems.
Yeah.
The challenges. Because, let's be real, no system is perfect. And something this big, it's bound to have its critics, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So in the next part of our deep dive, let's get into those challenges, the potential downsides, and really consider if this is the revolutionary solution Coulors thinks it is.
Sounds good to me.
Stay with us, folks. It's about to get even more interesting.
Oh, yeah. All right, so we're back, diving deeper into this whole super intelligent democracy thing. Last time we were talking about all the potential benefits, but, we got to be real.
Yeah.
Any idea this big, this radical, it's going to have some challenges, some concerns.
For sure. I mean, no system's perfect, right?
Yeah.
Especially not one this ambitious. So let's flip the script a bit. What about the downsides? What could go wrong? One thing that jumps out at me is, accessibility. Even with those low-tech options, how do we make sure absolutely everyone can participate? I'm talking older folks, people in marginalized communities, people who aren't, tech savvy. Can they really be a part of the system?
Yeah, that's a big one. And Coulors, he talks about inclusivity a lot. But bridging that digital divide, it's not simple. It's not just about giving people access. It's about making sure they understand how to use the system, that they feel comfortable with it.
Right.
Otherwise, you're right. This super intelligent democracy thing could actually end up leaving people behind.
It's like, imagine building this super high-tech town hall.
Yeah.
But some people can't even find the door.
Exactly. And even if they can find it, do they know how to get in? Do they know what to do once they're inside? And then there's the whole question of education.
Yeah.
Like, do people understand how these moral graphs work? Do they get how their data is being used? Do they see the bigger picture?
It's a lot to ask.
It is. You can't just blindly trust a system, especially one that runs on algorithms, no matter how smart they are.
I mean, think about it. You could have people inputting their values without really understanding what those values will lead to, what the consequences might be.
Right, right. So along with this system, you'd need a huge effort to educate people.
Public education.
Absolutely. Make sure everyone's informed before they participate. And then there's another thing Coulors talks about, manipulation. I mean, the whole point of those open source moral graphs is transparency, right? But could there be ways to, like, game the system? Could people mess with the data, tweak the algorithms to get what they want?
It's like we've seen that with social media.
Yeah.
Algorithms getting manipulated, spreading fake news, amplifying certain voices. Could the same thing happen here?
It's possible. Definitely something to think about. But Coulors, he has some ideas to prevent that. Like, he talks about using proof of stake blockchain.
Right.
It's more efficient, more secure than the old proof of work system. Harder for one person or group to control the whole thing, to manipulate the data.
So the type of blockchain you use actually matters.
It does, yeah. It's not just about recording the data. It's about how you protect it, how you verify it. And then there's another thing, zero knowledge proofs.
Okay, I've heard of those,
Yeah.
but Explain it like I'm 5.
All right, imagine you're going to a bar. Right. You got to show your ID to prove you're old enough. But you don't have to give them your whole life story.
Right, just your age.
Exactly. Zero knowledge proofs. It's like that.
Yeah.
You prove you are who you say you are, you input your values, but you don't have to reveal all your personal data.
Okay, that makes sense. But even with all that, the whole manipulation thing, it's still a worry.
It is. But Coulars, he talks about strong ethical frameworks, independent audits. Like, imagine a group of experts, diverse group. Their job is to just watch the system, look for any signs of bias, any manipulation.
Like watchdogs.
Basically. And they can recommend changes to the algorithms, to the moral graphs themselves, keep everything in check.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
No, no way. It's got to be constantly monitored, adapted. And that brings us back to the people, to us.
Us.
Yeah, citizen participation. We're the best defense against manipulation. If we understand the system, if we know the risks, if we're paying attention, we can stop anyone from trying to exploit it.
It's like technology is just a tool, right? It's all about how we use it. But even with the best intentions, couldn't this system, like, accidentally cause problems, unintended consequences, you know?
Of course. Any complex system has that risk. One thing that worries some people is echo chambers. You know, if the AI keeps feeding you information that agrees with what you already believe, well, that could actually make polarization worse.
Oh, wow. So the system meant to bring people together could actually push them further apart.
It's a possibility. But Coulars, he's thought about that too. He talks about making sure different viewpoints are represented, even in those personalized feeds. Like, maybe you get exposed to different opinions, things that challenge your beliefs.
Encourage critical thinking, debate.
Exactly. And that's important. But here's another question that comes up. Who decides what values go into the moral graph in the first place?
Yeah, good point. Like, what if certain values, maybe the ones held by people in power, end up being more important than others?
That's a real concern. But Coulars, he says there needs to be this ongoing conversation about values.
Okay.
The moral graphs, they shouldn't be static. They should change as society changes, as our priorities change.
So it's about making sure everyone's voice is heard, not just the loudest ones,
Yeah,
not just the people in charge.
Absolutely. But that leads to another challenge. Conflict resolution.
Uh-oh.
What happens when people have values that just don't agree? How do you find a compromise in a system that's all about consensus?
Yeah, some issues are just really divisive. Could that, like, paralyze the whole system?
It's possible. Coulars talks about things like weighted algorithms, ethical boards. But it's complicated. Like, how do you choose who's on these boards? How do you make sure they're fair? And what happens when they disagree with each other?
Right, so even if we figure out the tech, the logistics, we're still dealing with human nature.
We are. Conflict, different values, bias, those things don't just disappear.
So superintelligent democracy, it's not a magic bullet.
No, it's not. It's a tool, a powerful tool, but it's up to us to use it responsibly.
Okay, so this is another big question. What about the global impact? What if this system actually catches on worldwide? I mean, Coulars thinks it could be the new standard. What would that mean for the world?
That's a whole other level of complexity, and that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. The potential benefits, the potential risks of a world where AI plays a bigger role in how we govern ourselves.
Okay, so we're back, and things are about to get really interesting. We've talked about the good, the bad, the complicated. Now let's take a step back and think big picture. Global impact. What happens if this superintelligent democracy thing actually takes over the world?
Well, Coulars, he's not afraid to talk about that. He actually thinks this system could be the answer to some of the biggest problems we're facing globally.
Like climate change, global inequality. He even says that countries that don't adopt this model, they might get left behind.
Yeah, like economically, politically, almost like there's this pressure, get on board or become irrelevant.
It's a pretty bold statement. I mean, how would this system even work with, like, existing power structures, international relations? I mean, would it lead to more cooperation or more conflict?
Good questions.
Yeah.
And, would it help those who are already marginalized or just make things worse?
Okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say superintelligent democracy does become a global thing. What could go wrong? What are the risks?
One worry is that it could create a new kind of colonialism.
Digital colonialism.
It's exactly. Like, imagine powerful countries, big tech companies, they could use their control over the technology to influence the moral graphs of, developing countries.
So they'd be pushing their own values, their own interests, disguised as, like, democratic progress.
Exactly. It'd be like the old civilizing missions, but with algorithms instead of armies.
So we'd be trading physical colonies for digital ones. Not great.
Not great at all. And even if everyone has good intentions, there's the risk of like cultural flattening, all the different values, perspectives, they could get lost in this push for global consensus.
We could end up with everyone using the same system, but the values behind it, they all come from the same place, the people in power.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just give everyone the technology. It has to be implemented in a way that respects different cultures, different contexts.
It's about empowering communities to decide their own values, their own priorities.
Absolutely. Which brings us to another big challenge, conflict resolution. I mean, what happens when different countries, different cultures, they have values that just clash? How do you find common ground when the whole system is built on consensus?
Yeah, we've talked about weighted algorithms, ethical boards, but on a global scale, that sounds almost impossible.
It would be incredibly complex. I mean, who gets to be on these boards? Who decides what's fair? And how do you stop them from being influenced by politics, by money?
So even with superintelligent democracy everywhere, we'd still be dealing with all the messy human stuff. Conflict, disagreements,
It's
bias.
the human element. You can't just program it away.
Superintelligent democracy, it's not a utopia. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used in good ways or bad ways.
It all comes down to how we use it, our choices, our values.
This whole deep dive, it's been quite a journey. We've explored the possibilities, the potential, the risks. It's a lot to think about.
It is. And what does it all mean for you listening right now? We've given you a lot to consider. What resonates with you? What worries you? What gives you hope?
Is superintelligent democracy the answer? Or is it like a fantasy that's just not realistic?
Honestly, we don't have all the answers, but the important thing is to ask the questions, to have these conversations, to be open to new ideas.
Even radical ones. So keep thinking, keep questioning, keep exploring. The future of how we govern ourselves, it's not set in stone. It's something we create together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.